we'll be on the lookout for like methed out cicadas tripping balls on Massospora, which is producing psilocybin. That to me is even more bizarre and more compelling, is that there's a fungal tie-in with this. Something interesting happening this summer that you probably have heard about is here in the Midwest, there's going to be this mass emergence of the periodic cicada. And there's going to be, more exciting still, are two different broods emerging, the 13 and the 17 year. And everybody's talking about this. Everyone's buzzing, no pun intended, about these cicadas that are going to be driving us nuts and what to do. There'll be people wanting to cook them up. All the animals outside, birds and raccoons and things, will be gorging themselves. People will be marveling at how these organisms develop this weird periodicity where they live underground for 13 or 17 years before emerging as adults. But one other thing that's going to be going on that to me is even more bizarre and more compelling is that there's a fungal tie-in with this. So while people are running around looking at these cicadas, every once in a while they're going to see like part of a cicada, like half of a cicada on the ground dead. And they're all going to be like killed in the same kind of weird, gruesome way. And most people are not going to know what's going on unless you're a mycologist. So these cicadas that will become infected with this parasitic fungus, which is the genus is Massospora. This fungus is, before it kills the cicada, it will cause them to like behave very erratically, fly around and crash into others of their own kind and infect them with this fungus. And then furthermore, near the end of the life of these adult cicadas, their butt end is going to fall off and their body is full of conidia, of spores of the fungus that are just going to be like raining down like salt and pepper out of these things. In fact, mycologists even call these like flying salt shakers because that's kind of what they look like. So, okay, so what's going to happen? All these spores are raining down, then what? This is where it gets even stranger still. The spores will sit in the soil and not germinate. They can't germinate for, you guessed it, like 13 or 17 years. They will germinate and then infect the next brood that's going to emerge of these things 13 or 17 years from this year. And as these adult now cicadas are coming out of their tubes, out of these chimneys that they build to climb out of the soil, that's when they will pass through this germinating fungus. It's a zygomycete fungus, this Massospora, and it will then infect the next generation, and the whole thing will continue. But there's even other things. Not a lot's known about Massospora. It's only been studied kind of recently, but there's been some other interesting things found out about sort of what gives it its mojo. And it turns out this Massospora, this zygomycete fungus that it does nothing other than infect cicadas, the secret to how it gets the cicadas to sort of bend to its will and fly around erratically, crashing into others of its own kind, it does this by a kind of a mind control and some other drugs that it produces, one of which is psilocybin, like the secret sauce in magic mushrooms. It produces psilocybin. It also produces a kind of an amphetamine, which, causes an already kind of hyper insect to be like crazy hyper. And the males fly around trying to copulate with like every other of their kind. And obviously this helps to spread the spores. So this summer, when you're out in June and you hear the buzzing in the trees, if you live in the Midwest, and are marveling at these cicadas that are covering every surface and they're driving you batty, actually look at them a little more closely. And you might find some of these salt shaker members of their kind that are infected with this Massospora fungus. So, it's really interesting. People walk into the woods and see mushrooms and things like that. That might be their only encounter with fungi, but it turns out, the fungi are all around us. They are the puppet masters in the forest, sort of farming the trees. They're pathogens on pretty much everything in the forest, including the insects. So they're really all around controlling a lot more of the planet than we can even imagine because they're so small and kind of out of sight. So pretty interesting. I know what you're going to ask next. How many of these do I need to eat so that I can trip balls? Actually, it was a year or two ago, someone did a study on Massospora, and it might have even been the paper where they found that psilocybin was produced by this fungus. They sort of calculated how much psilocybin, the magic component of the magic mushrooms. How much psilocybin was produced by Massospora? And they found that you would have to eat something like hundreds of pounds of cicadas to get any sort of a significant dose. So if you were just about ready to run out in this summer and attempt to trip balls on eating cicadas, I don't think it's going to happen.
So don't be going around licking cicada butts.
I don't think so. No. Well, not to trip, but it could be fun.
Cool. Yeah.
Who knows? Licking cicada butts. I like that. Is again how this fungus works in the cicadas isn't known that well because it hasn't really been studied so much, and the cicada's underground for the vast majority of its life. Anyways, as these spores rain down from the Massospora, they sit in the soil again for years and years and years and germinate when the cicada is emerging from its tunnel. The other thing about the cicada, though, that's really interesting is, why does it have this periodicity about it at all? Why does it come out every 13 or 17 years only? Why not every year like some other cicadas do? Or why not like every other year, every 2 years, every 4 years, like lots and lots of organisms? Well, no one really knows, but what's been theorized that must have happened, because this is such a bizarre thing, is some sort of organism that was a parasite or a predator of this group of organisms was so dialed into it that whenever they emerged in large numbers, this predator or parasite also emerged in equally large numbers and probably nearly wiped them out every single time, so that if they tried to elude its predator by waiting underground and then emerging every other year, well, the predator emerges but doesn't catch it that year, but it catches it the next year and eventually gets dialed in. So now if it's happening every 2 years or every 4 years or whatever, it's multiples of an even number. So its predator's gonna figure it out, and its life cycle will overlap that of its host. But if it went to a prime number that's not divisible by 2, you couldn't, by simply coming out every other year, catch it. If it was every 4 years or 6 years, you would still catch it. If it's every 13 years, there's nothing that's a multiple of 13 or 17. It's a prime number. So this somehow must have been the secret to it getting away from whatever the selective pressure was against it, And there's a few other instances in nature that we know of stuff happening this way, but this is almost unique with this periodic cicada. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So when you see them out this year covering every surface, because there will be, I think in my Lives of Fungi book, the feature we have on this Massospora cicada story, I think that I quote a source that says when they come out, it's something like 1 billion adults per acre, which, and I've personally witnessed this a few times in my life. They literally cover every surface, certainly every tree, all the lower branches on trees. They're just everywhere. You'll see all organisms that feed on stuff like this. So birds and raccoons and anything that feeds on insects, they will literally be stuffed and lying around listless because they've gorged themselves, but they didn't get them all, So this is a successful release of this organism. Whereas the annual cicada that comes out every year, they're buzzing around and stuff's picking them off left and right. Obviously, a few make it to reproduce and pass their genes on to the next generation. But when this magic cicada comes out this summer, they will totally overwhelm all their predators, and that's the secret to them surviving. And then they'll go away, and we won't see them again for another 13 or 17 years. Pretty amazing.